G'day everyone and welcome back to Drafted, the official SuperCoach Draft show right here on the official SuperCoach podcast feed. It is your boy Dossie here alongside SuperCoach Draft enthusiast Patch. Welcome back, Patch.
G'day, happy to be back. I'm very keen for some more draft chat.
Episode 2, we are going to be talking all things midfielders and we're getting into ranking season. And to help us with our ranks, we have draft expert and former member of the world famous Jock Reynolds community. It is Lekdog. Welcome back, Lekdog.
Thank you, mate. Self-proclaimed draft expert. Happy to be here. Happy to deliver the official SuperCoach Draft rankings. And everything we say in this podcast will stand and is not to be argued with. These are factual rankings we are giving you.
Yep. Correct. Absolutely.
There'll be no
correct.
changes between now and whenever your draft weekend is. And if you pick a player that is suddenly injured, that is on you.
It's on you. Now, if you do want to read Lekdog's entire top 100 ranks, including positional tiers, that's available right now on Code Sports. You can go check out the entire list there. But at the moment, we're going to go through the top 30 midfield rankings. And just to be clear, this is for SuperCoach Draft. If you want to check out our thoughts on midfielders in SuperCoach Classic, the salary cap format, you can check that out on this very feed. Our previous episode yesterday, we recorded on the Lair. We're going to go in conjunction with them talking midfielders in Classic, then jumping on the Drafted podcast to talk all things draft. Let's get started. Let's go through your top 10 Lekdog, and we'll discuss this glorious top 10 that you've got.
Yeah, well, do you want to go from 1st to 10th or 10th to 1st? Are we going to
start with number one?
Number one. I mean, number one, he's not just number one in the midfield, he's number one in the comp. He was last year as well. It's Marcus Bontempelli. He's the best player in SuperCoach. He might be the best player in the AFL.
Yeah, let's roll through 1 through 10, and then I think we'll discuss each sort of little pick there.
So after the Bont, we've got young gun Nick Dacos in at number 2. Zachy Butters falls at number 3. Zach Merritt, Mr. Consistent, number 4. Caleb Sarong, 5th. Lockie Neal, still a top 10 player, number 6. Andrew Brayshaw is 7th. Josh Dunkley is 8th. Luca Davies Uniacke is 9th. And sitting at 10th, I have Isaac Heaney.
Okay, well, I think now we'll just discuss a few of the individual players. Bont and Dacos, top 2, even Butters, 3rd. I think there's no real arguments there. All guys that could potentially go 120. Butters already did go 120 last year. Dacos, I think it was a 117. Maybe talk us through your tiers as well at this point, Lekdog, and then we can discuss sort of further that. Just briefly outline what tiers are again. We did our Draft 101 episode the other week, so we are going to be talking more at an in-depth level now that we're into the official podcasts. But walk us through your tiers in that top 10.
Yeah, for sure. There's a couple of things to note. If you're defence or mid or ruck eligible, you'll be found in those rankings, not in the midfield ranking. We're just talking pure mids. The way I do my tiers, so last year this was highlighted a lot where I had, for instance, Zach Merritt ahead of Caleb Sarong, and everyone lost their mind and said, Caleb Sarong's better than Zach Merritt. And I just have him slightly ahead, but they're both tier 3 players. So to me, the number one on his own standout tier 1 player is Marcus Bontempelli, and you do everything you can to get him. Then, at your next pick, if you had a Nick Dacos or a Zach Butters, who I have in tier 2 available, I essentially have them on equal footing. So you want to grab one of them if they're available with your second pick, or with your first pick if Bont's not available. And then tier 3 is a bit bigger. It's got Merritt, Sarong, Neal, and Brayshaw in it. And basically, it's just, I do have to put these guys in an order, but I'm basically saying these guys are all pretty much in the same spot. You'd be happy with getting these guys anywhere around your selection.
So it's not dissimilar to saying this guy's first, these two guys are equal second, and these guys are all like equal third.
Yeah, and so that when you're talking about mid-specific, yes, and then I use those positional tiers when I'm putting together the top 100 because I might bump a tier 1 forward above a tier 5 midfielder, even though he's going to score lower just because he's got a rarer position. So They matter more in the top 100, but yeah, as you said, Patch, when we're talking midfielders, if there's two guys at a tier 3 and you're upset that one's ahead of the other, they're basically in the same spot.
Yeah. Like I'm incredibly mad at you disrespecting my boy Zach Merritt like that.
Disrespecting. I think he's way higher than he actually averaged last year versus some of these guys. Maybe walk us through why you're so keen on a Zach Merritt this season. I think, Sarong was slightly above him. Lachie Neale was certainly averaged higher than him last season, but I'm not arguing against Zach Merritt. He's an absolute gun. We know that, but he is very high in your ranks here, Leck.
He is. So one of the key factors I put into these rankings isn't just their average, it's the total points they produce across the season. So Zachy Merritt, he was 5th last year for total points in the midfield, and he basically sits there every single year. And for me, that consistency and that availability is really important. Nick Dacos is above him just for upside, and he's just a beast. And then if you're going to split hairs in this tier 3 section, which is Merritt, Sarong, Neale and Brayshaw, I just feel like Merritt, for both consistency and availability, he's probably a hair ahead of those other guys. But you're right. Lachie Neale did average more than him last year, and he played one less game than him. And it basically comes out at they scored the same amount of points.
Yeah, a couple of other players I want to discuss. I know I'm high on this guy. I think I have him a touch lower in my ranks. I think I have him at 10th, but still very high. But Andrew Brayshaw at 7 as well. From memory, I think 109 average last year, so putting him top 10, especially at 7th, just below the likes of Lachie Neale, who averaged 120, and just slightly below Caleb Sarong, who averaged 115. You're expecting big things from Andrew Brayshaw in 2025.
Yeah, he's another one where I just think there's some upside built into his game. I think there's some extra points maybe available in that Fremantle midfield. And, I'm hoping that 5 stops going anywhere near it. I'm interested to see what Haydn Young's role is in the new year. But I just think there's a slight bit of upside in him. And again, he's consistent. He plays every game. He scored slightly less total points than a Josh Dunkley, but I do think he's got a bit of upside built into him. So, I'm pretty happy with anyone in these spots. Brayshaw, Neale, Caleb Sarong, they're all bloody good. But Brayshaw, for me, he's very similar to a Zach Merritt. And you'll find as we go through these ranks, I prefer a higher floor than a higher ceiling. You'd like both, but I prefer consistency, particularly in draft, particularly because I'd recommend if you're running draft, you're not having captains turned on. I just want guys who are going to play every week and score points every week. I think Brayshaw, Merritt, they fit the bill in that respect, and they just get a little bump that as a result.
So Isaac Heaney was all the rage last year being a forward. In Classic, people frothed over him, and rightfully so. He was playing as a midfielder. Has lost that forward eligibility, and you've still got him in the top 10. You think he's still a top 10 midfielder, standalone, once you take the forward situation out? We've got Mills coming back. The Swans lost the grand final, have a new coach. You're not worried about his role changing, him maybe going forward to fix their forward line problems. Talk me through the Haydn dog.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. My assumption, Patch, would be that his role remains pretty similar to last year. So a lot of midfield, but also able to push forward and kick goals. Yes, Callum Mills will be back, and he may be back for 2-3 whole games next year or this year. It's going to be really impressive when he does. But I just don't see there being too much scope for Heaney's role to change. Yes, he lacks forward eligibility, so he won't be a classic option. But there's no reason why he can't score points. I could see arguments. So I got him in at tier 5 ahead of Tom Green, Patrick Cripps, and then Noah Anderson, Christian Petrarca at tier 6. You could argue that maybe Tom Green outperforms him. Maybe I'm biased because the first time I've ever owned Tom Green in Classic last year, he scored 5 points. Maybe I'm biased because I'm not sure on Christian Petrarca's health, but I really think there's no reason why Isaac Heaney can't outscore Errol Gould and Tom Green and Patrick Cripps in total points in the year 2025. I was really tossing up, and again, this is splitting hairs between Errol Goulden and Isaac Heaney. I think Errol Goulden's scope to play outside at times can potentially hinder the cap on his scoring, even though we know he's got a massive ceiling. But Isaac Heaney, like, the Swans are serious. He needs to continue playing in their midfield and pushing forward and kicking goals in clutch moments, which is what provides really good SuperCoach scoring.
Yeah, well, you mentioned some of those names from 11 to 20. Do you want to run through the full list of 11 to 20 for us?
Oh, let's do that. So 11 to 20, we've got it was Isaac Heaney at 10, Errol Goulden at 11, Tom Green at 12. They're both tier 5. Paddy Cripps at tier 5 as well at 13. Tier 6 is made up of 2 players, Noah Anderson and Christian Petrarca. That tier is really sort of guys with upside compared to where I've ranked them, either upside because of age or upside because they missed last year with a lot of injuries. Tier 7, which is 16th and 17th, I've got Jack Steele and Rory Laird. They're your older inside mids. And then closing out the top 20 in Tier 8, I've got Sam Walsh, Adam Treloar, which we may need to talk about, Clayton Oliver, and then Chad Warner at 21. And that's my top 8 tiered players.
All right, I'm keen to jump in here and discuss a few players. I mean, I personally, I think I'm on board with Patch. Did you have Tom Green quite a bit higher? Like, I did have him. I've got him 5th, actually, in my latest ranking. So I just don't see many players at GWS able to play inside mid. And if he I know the disposal's an issue, but, they do have an additional package up forward this year for him to deliver to as well. So hoping that he can sort of clean up a few of those inefficiencies and really make a massive jump this season. So I'm kind of on board, although I also copped that nasty classic hit last year of the 5. But we move on, and I've got him pretty high in my rankings. Interested also, just before we quickly moved on there, I've also got LDU really high. I think you had him 9th. So, but moving on to the next bracket, and player, let's discuss a couple in there. Obviously, Adam Treloar at 19. You said pre-show, and we now discuss it, but you haven't adjusted these yet for injuries. We've seen Adam Treloar is going to be out for an extended stretch of the preseason and likely the start of the season as well. You're going to adjust him down, but how far do you think, and what do you do with these injuries in the preseason?
Yeah, he's a tough one. I actually felt like I had him low to begin with because of potential injury risk. So he was the 9th ranked midfielder last year for total points, had a mammoth year. And I just didn't, even when I had him sitting here at, what did I have him at? 19th. I didn't even think, I thought that was a risk, to be honest. But it was hard to ignore the numbers, but because I was worried about his health. He has proven that his health is already questionable. So you have to bump him down. But I'm not sure, like, how far do you bump him down? If he's on the board and you're choosing between him, Touk Miller, and James Peatling, who I have, in the 30s, are you going to take any of those 2 over him? It'd be tough too when you're looking at the season on the whole, because you need Adam Treloar on park towards the end of the year when you're pushing for finals, and he is probably going to outscore those guys when he's on the field. The question is, can you trust his health? And so far, no. So he probably drops from 19 down to 29 for me, just off the back of that preseason injury. But he's going to outperform that on an average basis. It's just how often is he going to be on the park?
I had him that far down even before the injury, basically just because I was preempting an injury, because he, last year was just a massive outlier in his career that I didn't think that it was something that would or could really continue, because it's just, it's an outlier and maybe shouldn't be counted.
Before sorry, Patch, go on.
Yeah, there's no doubt that he scores points when he's fit, but how many years has he been fit and played that full season? Especially at his age and the club that he's at, who knows? The Bevo factor also scares me. Sorry, Dossie, you were saying.
No, I was just saying, on the back of that, what are you thinking, like, adjustment-wise? We can talk about forwards in the forward pod. There's probably a few relevant names there, but a name like Ed Richards, starting to become a name in classic circles even as a potential option. But I really like him as a player that could maybe go 105 plus. Where do you see him now that with this injury? Like, I thought he could perform pretty well regardless of the Treloar factor, but does this impact him quite a bit, or is it just kind of like he's going to do what he did regardless, and those possessions might go to some other players that we'll probably be talking about in the forward podcast, I'd imagine?
depends on how Luke Beveridge is feeling that particular Saturday afternoon at Marvel. Like, I hate predicting the Dogs so much because Bevo does throw guys around. Richards proved that he was a good centre bounce midfielder and a good midfielder, but does he get moved to half-back? Does he move kind of forward? He's versatile enough that worries me a little bit, so I probably wouldn't be jumping on him before 20, maybe a little bit further up. But he's a good player, good footballer, should be a good scorer, but I've got trust issues with Luke Beveridge, and he's going to have to do a lot of work to come to the table for us to resolve those issues, and we'll need to go through some counselling before that can really, I can really trust him fully.
I think Libba's another one that is he's a guy that I struggled to fit in because I was like, is he going to keep doing what he did last year? He was very good last year when he was playing and scored a lot of points. Maybe he gets a bit of a bump. You'd hope it's Riley Sanders is the one that gets the bump, but literally, as you said, Patch, who knows?
Who knows?
We can talk about them in the Forwards pod. Looking forward to that. But there's a couple of other injury guys here. Sam Walsh of your Blues, you're a big Blues man. Was this factoring in before his hamstring setback, or was this including that?
No, this was assuming he would have a preseason injury when I made this.
Okay.
I'm mentally prepared as a Carlton supporter to get the Sam Walsh notification every year. It's a hamstring. It's not his back's broken, so it's a step up from last year. Again, I think on an average basis, he'll outperform that, but at some point he's going to miss time during the regular season, and as a result, he gets bumped down to 18. I think is he going to be Carlton's highest averaging midfielder when he plays? I might say that. I think he'll be Carlton's highest averaging midfielder when he plays. I think he'll outperform Cripps and Chera. I just don't know how many games he's going to play. He's going to miss time at some point. You just don't want it to be during your SuperCoach finals.
The Jagger Smith slander from you is outrageous.
Jagger Smith's going to be playing off half-back, so he'll probably have a decent 85 to 90 average year one.
Yeah. The latest on Petrarca today from Melbourne was that he's getting towards full contact training, so we're still not there yet, for those wondering what the update is. There's the full yarn up on Code Sports and Herald Sun if you're intrigued for more, but basically he's still not in full contact, still wearing the no contact hat. So yeah, do you feel like you might move him up if you see him in preseason games, if you've got a draft after some of those preseason games, or you're still a bit worried and you're still likely to keep him around that mark even if he's proved to be fully fit?
Yeah, I'd need to see him in the preseason games because he might jump Noah Anderson, who I've got in the same tier, but is he going to outperform a Paddy Cripps, a Tom Green, or an Errol Goulden? Maybe, but probably not. I'm pretty comfortable with where he sits, given the question marks over him. And he's not the same type of midfielder that a lot of these guys are ahead of him. He's more of an impact guy than a massive, massive accumulator. I know he can get big numbers, but most of these other guys are like, they're going to get 30 touches every single game no matter what. Whereas I feel like he's slightly more impactful. So his scoring might be a bit more up and down in 2025 than these other guys. So I'm pretty comfortable with him. He's ahead of Jack Steele. I think we know what Jack Steele's going to give us. My question mark over St Kilda is St Kilda and the various additions they've had in Jack McRae. And I mean, Jack Carroll's not going to come in and take midfield minutes, but they've added quite a lot of depth to that midfield from other clubs. So I think he'll just perform how he did last year. And Rory led at 17. For me, it was the biggest question mark because he obviously dropped off last year in terms of his scoring, but he's always available. And there's an opportunity that perhaps he goes back to his old halfback sort of role and allows more midfield time for a James Peatling or a Dawson or whatever. So he's a bit of an enigma for me because he could be anywhere between 100 and 115 this year.
Yeah, just on Laird, the journos working over here, and you can hear them on the Phantoms Lair podcast, but Simeon Thomas Wilson mentioned just on the show, in the Midfielders Classic show, that, yeah, he sees Laird as he has literally not been training midfield at all this preseason, that he's expecting to just be playing as a pure defender. So is your ranks kind of, him at 17, he just scores wherever he plays is my guess, but getting that DPP of defender would just be an added bonus, I suppose, from that perspective, Lekdog.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that sort of planning ahead. If you get him and as the 17th midfielder taken in the draft, meaning you've probably got one or two ahead of him, you're going to end up with and he does play defense, a defensive role. You're going to end up with the best defender available. So, or maybe not including a couple other guys. But if you look back at his years in past, he was sort of averaging 100 to 120 in that defensive role, and then he moved pure midfield and really exploded. But he's just going to score. He's just going to score. They want the ball in his hands wherever he is, and he's done it before, which is a big factor for me. So, yeah, he might not average what he has averaged in terms of those high midfield ceiling numbers again, but he could go 105 as a defender, and that'd be a real win.
Yeah, that's probably one of the big ones for me that I've differentiated quite a bit. Like, I've got him, I think he'll average in the 90s still. He always seems to do that, but I've kind of factored in him playing defence. I still think he'll be a valuable pick given that he will get likely defensive status, but I sort of dropped him down a fair bit because I think there's just a lot more mouths to feed at Adelaide this year, and it's kind of a different setup that we're going to see, but that's why we're in ranking season. It's all about those projecting those scores. One last guy that's been a massive talking point in Classic. I'll throw to you, Patch, for this one. So Lekdog's got Clayton Oliver at 20. Where do you have him, and where do you see that? Because talk about risk. I mean, this guy's probably the biggest risk out there, but he could also provide great reward if you're getting him as your 20th best midfielder.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at like his history, and that couple of years runs of averages for the season of 109, 122, 123, 127, 120 before his 84 last year. Like, I've got him ranked 9, and I was worried that was a little bit low. Like, if he's back to his best, then he's a top 5 SuperCoach midfielder in the competition. And from everything that we've seen, it appears that he's back from over the personal troubles, having a preseason that, the preseason we dreamed he would have last year. There's, I think all the signs point to him being back. Whether or not that translates to scoring, to him still doing the same stuff he did in the midfield, is the risk we take. And I'm more inclined to take that risk this year. If you can get him at pick 20, incredible. But I can't fathom him being there in most drafts. I'm really bullish on him, and I've got him one spot ahead of Tom Green, just based on that history. So, what do you think, Dossie?
I think he's going to be one of the great talking points because he's locked into everyone's Classic team, or most, he's in 50% of Classic teams. But in draft, where does he go is a great question. I feel like in some drafts, he'll be a really valuable pick if he does deliver, what we think he will. And I'm probably on the board of thinking, he's going to push that 110 sort of mark. But, we could be completely wrong, and he could go, you could just do what he did last year or 90s and you're burning an early pick. So, I don't know. I'm fascinated. I think, I had him at 13. Lex got him 20. You've got him 9. I feel like some people will have him 50. Some people will have him 3rd. So it's going to be a fascinating watch. And I'll be checking out what his ADP is as the closer we get to draft season as well, to just see where he is going in some mock drafts. But honestly, the easiest answer for that is I have no idea where he's going to go, and also where I'd be happy taking him. So despite having him at 13, like it's always like, can I do it, is the other thing as well, because that's what I think he'll do. But come draft night, do I have the guts to follow through? And I know I should be, but it's going to be, I'll be second guessing myself, I think, as well. So
part of it is as well, if you're taking him on the turn, if you're pick 10, you can get, Clayton Oliver at 10 and then get someone really reliable next to him. If you've got like you want to lean in and go with say LDU's there or Haney's there, or, someone's let Dunkley slip a little bit. You can take someone really reliable on the turn. You probably wouldn't be looking at him, pick 5 or pick 6, and then you got to come back and you're like, oh, Jack Steele alongside him doesn't feel particularly comfortable. But I think it'll be very fascinating to see where he lands.
and all of these questions are why I've got him sitting in tier 8 next to Sam Walsh, who question mark over his body, Adam Treloar, who before I made this list, question mark over his body, and then Chad Warner, and my question mark over Warner is like, I don't know, are you playing for Fremantle? Are you really good? Are you inconsistent? I'm not sure. So Clayton Oliver very squarely falls in my I don't know tier, and I think all of the players ahead of him in the tiers above him are a little bit safer for various reasons. But he's locked into my classic team. I hope he scores 120 points every single week, and I wouldn't be totally surprised if he did, but it is a risk.
Yeah. Let's go through the 21. Yeah. Sorry, Patch, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say the exact same thing.
Yeah, let's get through the 21 to 30 in your midfield ranks here. So we know Chad Warner is at 21. Who's at 22?
So 22 kicks off tier 9, which consists of Darcy Parish, Matt Rowell, Haydn Young, Jai Newcomb, Hugh McCluggage, Jordan Dawson, and Connor Rozee. And then tier 10 begins. It starts with Touk Miller and James Peatling to close out the top 30. Tier 10 goes on for a little while longer. But so to read those names again: Warner, Parish, Rowell, Haydn Young, Newcomb, McCluggage, Dawson, Rozee, Miller, and Peatling.
All right, where to start with this? I reckon Jordan Dawson and Connor Rozee, potentially we could start there. I think I'd probably have Jordan Dawson in my ranks quite a bit higher. Came off the 113 average the year before, dropped off last year, had a bit of a stinker for his standards, I think, the Crows skipper. Talk us through the 27 rank for Jordan Dawson.
Is that just because you traded him to me in a keeper league? Is that what this is?
I mean, that might be part of it. I did predict the drop off last year slightly. Again, Jordan Dawson, it's that whole Crows midfield setup. Is Jordan Dawson more outside than he is inside? Are they using him as a link-up player? Is he the guy winning the ball? There's just enough question marks for me that I dropped him down. Again, if you had him as your third midfielder in your team, you're going to be really happy. You'd probably be happy if you had him as your second midfielder in your team. But there was enough question marks raised last year with that 102 average that I just wasn't totally sure. Like, in 2022, the 110 average, 2023, the 116, were they the outliers, or were the 101 in 2021 and 102 in 2024 the outliers? I'm not sure I have the answers to that in the Crows midfield, and as a result, he just drops a little bit lower.
Guessing that Connor Rozee, borderline disrespect, is due to the injury risk as well, given you do factor that in quite heavily.
Yeah, that's part of it. Rozee was one of my first picked, not last year, but the year before, in that real breakout year where he played consistent midfield minutes and scored. I'm just pulling up his average. He averaged 108 in that year.
Yeah, forward
then last year dropped to 98 across 20 games. Again, he's a very versatile player for the Port Adelaide Power. I don't know why I called him the Port Adelaide Power, but he's very versatile. So, of the guys in that midfield, Ollie Wines had a bounce back year last year as well. I feel like maybe he's the one that gets moved around a bit, and I don't want to knock him. He's a bit more slight. Quite a few midfields seem to be beefing up and bulking up a bit the last year or two. So yeah, there's just enough question marks over him for him to drop down there. Also, I really like him and he's good, but I don't want him in my M1 or M2, or I could probably deal with him as an M3 in my draft.
You're always trying to give me trying to give me Darcy Parish. What is it with you? Why is Darcy Parish so high? What is, you got him at 22, which is extraordinarily high for a guy that's also under an injury cloud this pre-season. What are you doing?
I just think he's really neat. Darcy Parish, he's in that. I look at him and Clayton Oliver in a similar way, and it probably helps I've got them both in my classic team. Darcy Parish's ceiling games are so high. He's averaged 108 in 2023 across 18 games. The asterisk is obviously in his availability. 111 in 2022, 114 in 2021. So he has a scoring ceiling, struggled last year, never got fit. This is an upside play for me, and I'm happy to argue that he should be lower. But I really like him, and I do think he's got another year of going 110 in him. I just don't know when it is. I hope it's this year.
Yeah, working through a back issue at the moment. Darcy Parish not going to be playing in the practice match next week, but they are hopeful that he's going to be able to play.
Who else plays in the midfield for Essendon?
Yeah. Zach Merritt.
Yeah, who else?
Sammy Durham. Elijah Sardis.
Moving right along.
Here's the thing, right, about Elijah Sardis and guys like Ben Hobbs and stuff, is that if Parish is available and those guys are available, the coaches are always going to back in the senior guy to play that important midfield role. That's just what coaches do. So
yep.
When I went through Essendon's sort of midfield depth, the assumption is for this that Parish is available. He's the one who has to score points because Zach Merritt can't score any more points than he does.
Yeah, there is a world where Parish does go back to being 110. I just lost total faith in Essendon as a football club and an organisation, and that's spilled over into fantasy football.
If he was a Carlton player, he'd probably be 40th because I can't be objective on Carlton. So
yeah, we'll agree to be unable to be objective.
I want to talk about a few other players now, and one, I think he's your highest ranked player from Hawthorn, I believe, and he comes in at 25, Jai Newcomb. I've gone bullish on him this year. I've got him super high in my rankings. I've got him 11th, so I'm going really hard. I've brought this stat out on a couple of different podcasts. 115 SuperCoach average when the Hawks won last season. I just think they'll win more games, and I think he's generally a driving force in that. So I know that Will Day missed a few of his bigger games last year when he did pop off, but yeah, just I don't really want. That's just kind of I want to just mention that I'm pretty high on him, but I also wanted to talk about Will Day, who's circling some fantasy SuperCoach discussion at the moment, and Will Day's fair bit. He's way down in your rankings. I had him a little bit higher, but maybe talk about, because I can see here he's 49th in your rankings, which maybe catches people off guard.
It does. So Jai Newcomb, I think is going to be really good as well. I don't necessarily agree that Hawthorn are going to win a lot more games. I think he'll be the highest averaging midfielder for Hawthorn this year. I just don't know. I think he's a bit up and down, right? So he'll score games in the 60s, he'll score games in the 160s. And I'm not sure that his game has a really consistent base within it with how he plays. So I'm happy to have that inconsistency a bit lower. I don't mind if you personally have Jai Newcomb high. I think that's fantastic.
Thank you.
Will Day is an interesting one where it kind of reminds me, whatever, you can clip this. He kind of reminds me of Bailey Smith in that we all think he's good and we all think he's good at SuperCoach, but actually he's only had a little bit where he was actually decent at SuperCoach. Like he's had one season where he was actually SuperCoach relevant, 2023. I traded him in and used him as a loophole on a game he had to buy, and then he averaged 110 or whatever after that. But anyway, 2023, he averaged 97. Last year across 16 games, he averaged the 91. I think he's a very nice looking player. I just don't know that he's actually that good in terms of SuperCoach. Very similar to Bailey Smith when he's mid only. Like he's actually never done anything worth of note.
Huge call there by Lekdog. Might have to clip that as you say, Lekdog.
You just clip me saying he's never done anything of note. That'll get him listening.
Yeah, understand. Yeah. He's had a few elite patches though, and yeah, I suppose it's probably the more promise that he can keep delivering on that and avoid injury concerns, which have sort of hampered that consistency as well. Any final players you want to discuss, Patch? And then I think we'll each pick a sleeper, and then we'll round out this pod. Of course, as I've said, you can check out the full top 100 of Lekdog, including positional tiers, on Code Sports. Go check that out. We'll put some links out there as well for that. But Patch, any final thoughts on the ranks?
My final question is about I'm going to sneak outside the 30. We're only talking about the 30 on this pod, but I do want to question we've got access to Lex top 50 here. Tim Taranto at 31 intrigues me, Lec, as a little teaser for the audience to give him an extra pick. Can you talk me through Taranto? Obviously, you've got the con of his body being held together with gaffer tape and the pro of him playing for possibly the worst team to ever play Australian rules football. Talk me through how that's all come together.
Well, in 2023, he was the 16th best player in SuperCoach, and last year was the 213th best player in SuperCoach.
The duality of man.
You tell me where to put him. Yeah, there's if he's on the park and he's playing, he's going to be good because someone has to score points at Richmond. Is there going to be any incentive towards the end of the year if he does have a niggle to play him? Again, him in this tier of guys that's kind of like high ceiling. How many games are they going to play? It's your Matt Crouches, your Tim Tarantos, and I've got James Peatling and Touk Miller at the top of that tier 10, just above Tim Taranto. And while they might score less per game than him, I believe that they will play significantly more football than him in 2025.
Do you want to do your Peatling spiel? I know you love James Peatling. Do you want to go on? Just give it.
I'm keen to hear it.
Get the soapbox out. Give us a minute of James Peatling love.
Look, everyone who is a draft player has been watching Peatling flounder in the doldrums of GWS, playing as sub, coming on for minutes at a time, getting subbed off. But in the games when he did get unleashed and in the VFL, or the equivalent, I don't know, I'm pretty sure it's been the VFL the whole time he's been at GWS, he just dominated as just a midfield beast. He's been sent to Adelaide. He's going to be unlocked. He's pushed Rory Laird out of the midfield. Rory Laird, one of the greatest midfielders Adelaide's ever seen from a SuperCoach perspective, has been pushed out for this guy. Look, I think his floor is like a 95 and he plays 23 games, but I think he can crack triple digits. And I'll let the mathematicians tell you how he did when he wasn't sub, but I can tell you as an owner in several SuperCoach draft leagues last year, he was really bloody good.
Wow, that was a good take. Love that from James Peatling. I'm looking forward to having him and having a lot of stock in him around the place. So it'll be interesting to see where he does land in draft. Another player that's got a lot of buzz in classic circles. So will that mean that he goes higher in draft than you'd be willing to take him? It'll be interesting to see where that lands on draft day. Let's go through each pick. We're going to pick a sleeper, so a player that we think we can pick quite late in drafts that's really not being discussed too much at the moment, and a player that we think will be great value. Your sleeper first, Lekdog, if you will.
Yeah, I was struggling to split them. I'm going to do a sneaky and give you two, but I'll give you my real... So these are two Carlton players. I have him in my top 50 midfielders. One's Adam Chera, who I think is going to have his best season for Carlton, but I do think there's going to be hype about him with Sam Walsh's injury and stuff, so I actually think he'll go earlier. But Blake Acres, for me, is a guy that I think is going to be really underrepresented in drafts, and I think he's going to provide value. So he's not just a winger at Carlton. He also spent a hell of a lot of time behind the ball, being sort of a defensive relief and delivering the ball sort of further up the ground. With Nick Newman going down, there's question marks over who's going to be that sort of supportive Carlton player midfielder that goes back and supports. I think it just enhances his opportunity to do that, take some intercept marks, distribute from the back line. And last year, you wouldn't know it, but he averaged 93 points a game last year, 88 the year before. I think he's just going to be a really solid back-end sort of guy that gives you value in your midfield.
That is a big old sleeper. Blake Acres, love that. Patchy, who have you got for us?
I'm also struggling to split because I like talking about lots of different players, and sleepers are where it's really fun to talk about these players. You can talk about, your Tom Greens and your Isaac Henneys till the cows come home, but geez, I love sinking my teeth into guys that are just completely irrelevant to 90% of the people that play fantasy football. And it's three guys we've spoken a bit about. Rory Laird, where they can go back and they, might pick up defence eligibility. So I've got three of them I'm kind of keen on. Being Jace Burgoyne, Ollie Hollins, and I hate that I'm saying this, but Dylan Shiel, come on down.
Oh, and you flamed me for Darcy Parish. Wow.
I'm not taking Dylan Shiel at 22. I'm taking him at 222 in the draft. Yeah, all of these guys are kind of playing in the back line. Jace Burgoyne, I think, is a really, really good player. And, Port should look at dragging him back and using him a fair bit out of the back line. Dylan Shield, for some ungodly reason, has been given the keys to the half back line, and I hate it, but it'll score points. It'll, in the same way that Nick Martin frustrated me last year, but still scored points. Dylan Shield will do it. And Ollie Hollands, I don't know, maybe he's just neat.
He's currently, as of right now, if you started the season, he's currently Nick Newman's replacement. So
yeah.
I suspect that might shift by the time the season starts, but right now. And Jace Burgoyne's a great shout. I actually thought he was going to be... I was looking for him in the rankings when I was making this. I was actually looking for him in the defence. Didn't realise he was going to be mid-only. He was a favourite of the waiver wire article last year. I expect a big year from young Jace. I think that's a great shout.
Yeah, interesting. You're willing to sort of, I guess it's not draft capital, we're talking about sleepers, but guys that don't actually have the status that you probably want to play them in, though, that you're willing to draft.
This is as bench a pick as they get.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
By the way, I do love Jace Burgoyne. I think even if he plays just midfield as a wing, he could put up some big numbers as a wingman. He's just class. I've got a player that is midfield only, but was actually a forward eligible player last year. Certainly under the radar from what I've seen, but there's been a bit of buzz coming from the club socials, if anything. Tom Powell at North Melbourne.
Whoa.
George Wardlaw has gone down with that hammy. I personally don't think Luke Parker's going to have as big a say in the midfield as people maybe are thinking at all. You know, what's the purpose of putting a 33-year-old player into the midfield when you're rebuilding and you're trying to develop the core young group? Tom Powell coming in. Last year when he had 50% plus CBAs, he averaged 93. I think his average last year was a flat 80. I think maybe we just see a bit more midfield exposure this year and him taking the next step. We saw him have some massive games last year when he was given the opportunity. So, again, we're talking about a guy that I think you'll be able to get pretty late in drafts and a guy that could start the season, especially being part of the, core midfield unit at North Melbourne. So that is my sleeper, Tom Powell.
I think you'd hope, if you're running North Melbourne, that Luke Parker is playing 20% mid, 80% forward, and Tom Powell's playing the inverse of that. I would hope, as a North Melbourne fan, that those are the two that are sort of flipping with each other. But then again, coaches like to play their veterans in the positions of value. But yes, I think that's a decent shout.
Yeah, I think you're right, but as someone that's invested significant draft capital in keeper leagues and in redraft leagues into Tom Powell and being burnt flat 50 is how I describe me checking his score most weeks whenever I had him, as opposed to his midfield split. I want him to be good. I love him. He's got great junior numbers. He'd be a good midfielder if they let him loose, but I have been burnt so many times before by Tom Powell.
Yeah, it's a midfield that has a lot of depth now, which I'll concede as well. He could simply just not be in the midfield and be playing bit part roles around the ground, which would certainly not make me interested. But he's a preseason watch. He might rise, he might fall on my watch list. But if I'm taking him with a very late pick in the draft, I'd be happy snaffling him up and hoping and seeing if he does pop, especially early in the season when there isn't going to be that George Wardlaw in the lineup. All right, well that was the top 30 midfield ranks. Thank you very much, Lekdog, for sharing those with us. You can see the full list on Code Sports, as we have said a few times, so go check that out. I will put it in the show notes as well, link to that, but yeah, just go check it out on Code Sports. And we will see you for the next rankings. We're going to be talking rucks, so probably a little bit of a shorter episode for the rucks, you'd imagine. But thanks for listening to Drafted. We will see you then.